work, welcome Dr. Manjunatha, who's the principal of the New Horizon College and again a leader in the higher education ecosystem. Let me also welcome Dr. Selvan. He has a long name, but he's allowed us to call him Dr. Selvan. He's a vice chancellor of a university which is very, very large and growing, and he's recently taken on bigger responsibilities at the university. So we really welcome you and congratulate you on your new role. The SRM Institute of Science and Technology is a very big institute in terms of the number of students passing. So it's a big responsibility. We have Mr. Raghav Gupta from Coursera. He's the country manager for Coursera in India and really powering the digital education journey for many institutes. So thank you, Raghav, for doing that. We will also be joined by Mr. R. Janardhan and Mr. Mrityunjay Lathe in a while. So let me start by saying that we will cover 4 things in the webinar today. One is the fact that how are these educational institutions and universities building digital resilience for excelling in higher education. We'll focus on why the education and learning needs to be a continuous process of upgradation and not be unidimensional, single course, single time. It has to be a continuous process of adding on new skills that is required. Second is the fact is how digital ready are each of these universities and other players in the higher education ecosystem. Third is how do we make the hybrid education effective and more palatable for all stakeholders, especially the learners. And last is how to be able to collaborate with each stakeholder and get them on the same page. Some of these issues are interrelated, and one doing well leads to another. So let me start with Dr. Selvan first. Dr. Selvan, your opening comments on how the education needs to be continuous, not just single degree. Even in the new education policy, there is a emphasis on skilling and reskilling and upskilling and adding new layers and in some way an open learning framework. So give us a sense of how are you making your university digitally resilient and ready for future in terms of changing the higher education ecosystem.
Yeah, good afternoon to all of you. I'm happy to be a part of this interesting discussion on building digital resilience in higher education. We are talking of 3 things actually. One is digitalization, resilience, and higher education. Interestingly, each one of them has a different connotation, but in the present times, we find them interlinked to the extent that one cannot adequately function without the other. Earlier, we used to call it as a virtual education, distance education, online education, but when you happen to teach in an institution, and if your degree is through a correspondent distance learning or whatever, people slightly look down. Face-to-face learning was much more important when compared to all other forms of learning. But today, policymakers and regulators are stressing that even if things go back to normal of the pre-pandemic days, digital learning is here to stay. Put it in another way, distance education is in thing in higher education today. Though because of this pandemic, a lot of changes have taken place, but in our own institution, we wanted our students to have a continuous learning process. There will not be any fixed number of courses that one should take. So in the curriculum itself, we introduced what is called as open electives. So that gives a lot of avenue for our students to choose whatever the course that they want to study, be it in the same institution offered by a different faculty, be it in another institution which is nearby where the students can travel and then attend the class, or they can also do through online, through different platforms which is available. And wherever they have been doing, all the credits have been mapped into our own system. So that was the first flexibility that we gave it to our students. The second one was, we started offering major and minor programs in the institution. So it doesn't mean that a civil engineering student need not know anything about computer science. A medical engineering graduate need not know anything about computer. So now, by undergoing about 6 courses or 7 courses, they'll be in a position to earn a minor degree to the actual degree for which they have enrolled. So that was the second one. Third one is, we have been collaborating with industry to offer what is called as a 1 credit course. When I say 1 credit course, we will arrange lectures on the recent technology or the niche topics where students have to be exposed, or that is the requirement in the industry. If you take the education institution, we may not have enough resources to teach the course as required by the industry. So we used to have adjunct faculty from the industry. They'll be coming to the institution, offering the course for the interested students. It is not mandatory. So once they happen to interact with the industry expert, they will understand what is the requirement, and that has helped us in different ways. Number one, there will be an opportunity for the student to go for an internship. There will be an opportunity for the student to go for the project work, and probably if they do well, they will also be absorbed in the same company. Discussing with many industrial experts, and all of us know that time is the bigger constraint. It's enough if we can deliver 2 or 3 lectures face to face and remaining remotely. Now, this has been done prior to this pandemic time also. So in this way, we bring in the industry, we bring in the other institutions. We'll also bring in faculty from other faculties where the students are nowhere related. Now, this has given a lot of opportunity for the student to learn what he wants. It is not that this is what is earmarked in the syllabus or in the curriculum, and this is what you are supposed to study. So with that, we can also say that when you have a strong collaboration with the industry feedback and guidance is very much required to revamp our curriculum and see that it is focused towards job ready. Then the next one is mentoring is critical for student training, for skill development, and also for job placement. And finally, entrepreneurial mind, which is the order of the day. It is called as the make a job, don't take a job. So these are some of the advantages when you happen to partner with an industry. So these are my opening remarks, and I'll stand by for other queries.
Thank you so much, Dr. Selvan, for making those remarks and being precise and short. That way we'll be able to cover all the 4 aspects. Let me bring in Dr. Manjunatha and then Dr. D.N. Rao. Mr. R. Janardhan has also joined us, so I'll be bringing him into the conversation soon. So first, Dr. Manjunatha, your opening comments on how you're building digital resilience in your own institution, and how do you see the digital resilience in the higher education ecosystem?
Yeah, thank you, sir, for this opportunity. I think we all aware this COVID-19 pandemic, it has given its own impact on the social life, even economic conditions, and also in education system. Really, one side, if you look at the impact of this COVID-19, really in the digital education, really it gave us the inevitable situation to move the education system. So now what we have done in digitally, we made our entire the campus digitally stable. So we gave importance to digital infrastructure. See, in most of the college I have seen, they have physical infrastructure, but digital infrastructure is also most important. What we started is, immediately we started taking the videos of the lab equipment experiments, because it's an engineering profession. There, practical exposure is very, very important. What we did, we actually told all our faculty members, though we had a video, but we made the video along with the simulation technique, we made it more effective for the lab experiment. and also study material, and our industry labs were there. Really, I actually thank our industry partners, because our college is the Autonomous Institute. In this Autonomous Institute, we also, previous Sir Selvam Sir, he was telling open elective, the similar kind of the procedure also we have. In BOS, we have professional elective. Professional elective, it is restricted to that, the parent specialization, and open elective, it is open to all the branches. In that open elective, I hats off to the industry labs. We have our industry labs, and in the industry, experts will take the classes online to all our the students. So accordingly, we actually taken care digitally, and we connected all the students. I think about 8 months we took online classes. Just maybe from the past 1 month, we are conducting offline classes and also hybrid classes. That means what we did is, we have our smart board. In that smart board, say for example, in the classroom, about 30 students will be there. Remaining 30 students will be connected the online through this smart board. At the same time, we teach the face-to-face interaction as well as online classes also we are conducting, sir. Actually, for that, I hats off to the technology and online platform already we started using. And because of this, we made entire campus, we made it Wi-Fi. Because initially also we were telling Wi-Fi campus, but we were not understanding whether the students are really getting all the material online, whether they are connecting the faculty member online. Now we increased the ecosystem, so entire campus, it became now the Wi-Fi campus. And also we started sending even the circular, any other material also through online. Entire thing paperless office also we are doing. And after maybe a pandemic, it gets over, maybe post pandemic, there also we wanted to stick this the online classes, sir. Because in that online, what my observation is, we actually could conduct more number of classes than as usual, because we save the traveling time, and also we connect to university at any point of time, we connect to the industry at any point of time. We need not to go industry to look at how industries are working, because if you have a good contact with industry, they are also showing how industries are working. Everything it is possible just because of this digital the education. I actually strongly believe, even the post pandemic time also, I want even the statutory bodies and also the governance should accept the digital education in the higher education. Because initially we were telling the mobile is banned in the classroom, truly speaking. But now I made it mandatory. The students should have the smart mobile phone, because we are connecting to them. We are conducting quizzes. We are conducting the test also, and we are asking question and interacting with them. And we can even taking attendance. Everything we are making it digital, sir. So the mobile phones now, it is not banned in the classroom, sir. That's what I brought one difference in our campus. Thank you, sir, for giving the.
Thank you, Dr. Manjunatha, is the principal of the new Horizon College of Engineering in Marathahalli in Bangalore. Thank you for those that, technology and technology devices are welcome in the classroom. They are not a distraction, but they can add on to the learning. And in the last 11-12 months, they become essential to learning, if I may use that term. Let me bring in first Dr. D.N. Rao and then Dr. Sudhir Gavne. Dr. Rao, your opening comments on how universities like yours are building digitally ready, digitally resilient higher education ecosystems and institutions.
Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. Digital resilience is a very nice term, but I have small reservations on that one. Education which is basically teaching learning process, has to be resilient for anything that happens around us. And it so happened, digital happened in the recent days. Realizing this one, almost from last 5-6 years onwards, we were thinking of how to make our education, teaching, learning process as resilient as possible for all possible changes. Today, it is COVID. Tomorrow, it could be something else. Day after tomorrow, it could be change of government. Anything can happen. But our teaching learning methodology in the institution must be resilient to all these things. And I'm very happy to say that our teaching learning methodologies have been resilient to the recent COVID-19. Our teachers nor our students, they weren't affected adversely. There might be slight changes here and there, but the life goes on, except that they happen to be at home. Okay. But the teaching learning spirit goes on. I will tell you 3 initiatives that we have taken to make it happen. We make sure that every student that comes to our institution is introduced to a term called spectral pyramid. That education has, like a pyramid, 4 phases. One is the academics, that's the essential part of it. The next one is excitement of research that comes out of this knowledge that you have. Then the third phase is the innovation, the spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship. And the fourth phase is how is it making difference, your knowledge, your research, your innovation, how is it making difference to the societal impact? These are the 4 phases that we talk about from day one the student joins the college. That had a big impact. And the second impact that we have seen is exceedingly well, and I would like to share with a sense of joy that it could be used others. We used a concept called presencing and design thinking. This design thinking term is one thing that has a magnitude of made a lot of difference for our students. How you design things with empathy, with your knowledge, with this one. And presencing is one term that we have actually coined almost 10 years ago, which means in a classroom or any learning center, you have to be present completely, both body, mind, soul, to the extent. Present, sense what is being taught. If the teacher is talking about today in Hyderabad is 38.5 degrees centigrade, your body must feel that, sense that 38.5 degrees centigrade. That's the sensing part of it. And experience it. That's what I mean, experience that 38.5. Sense, experience. And the last one is extrapolate. What is happening now? I learned this one. What could be the next one? That inquisitiveness must be there. This is the second element for our teaching learning process. And the third and the last one we have introduced very recently is a concept known as vertical literacy. It's a vertical literacy. Today, like you rightly pointed out in your write-up, we're all at a horizontal level. We're learning, but what purposes? I'm so glad one of the speakers mentioned about a major degree and a minor degree. That means somebody who is interested in something has an opportunity to immediately utilize it within the framework of the university, of the institution. So you learn something at a
macro level.
At a macro level, and what's your interest, you go vertically deep down and contribute when you're a student yourself. I think these are the 3 things that made a lot of difference. And COVID, though made difference in certain ways, but as far as the academics, learning, spirit of learning is concerned, okay, it remained the same with among our faculty and the students. That's what I want to share with the other panelists today, and I'm
Thank you so much. Thank you. I love the example of the spectra pyramid and what you called as, the 4 stages of learning and 4 dimensions of learning. I would like to bring in Dr. Sudhir Davne and Mr. R. Janardhan in a while, but we're talking about technology. So let me bring in a person who is, Dr. Manju Natha was talking about how technology has enabled campuses and universities and learning ecosystems to stay relevant. So let me bring in a person who's enabling technology to share how he feels about building digital resilience for the higher education system. So let me bring in Mr. Raghav Gupta, who's the MD and country manager for Coursera in India. Raghav, you heard 3 practitioners and we'll hear 2 more practitioners after you. So I thought it'd be a nice segue for you to get in and share what you feel and what you see when you interact with the leaders of the higher education ecosystem.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anuragji. So we're talking about digital resilience, and just thinking about resilience is helpful a little bit to say that this crisis that we have gone through, if ever a similar crisis were to hit, how would we be prepared for it, right? And I think that's the topic at hand. Before we talk about what to do in higher education, I was thinking it might be interesting to share with all of you what's happening in industry. And there are today about 3,000 businesses and millions of working professionals from those businesses who come to learn on Coursera. And I was looking at the top 10 skills that a working professional learned on Coursera in 2019, pre-COVID, and then in 2020 during COVID. And in 2019, the number 1 skill learned on Coursera was Python programming. Number 2 was neural networks. Number 3 was algorithms and regression. And then number 7 was writing. Number 8 was supply chain. Number 9 was cloud computing. Basically all hard skills, right? Whether they are in technology, whether they are in computer technology or supply chain. And there was a little bit of communication with number 7 being writing. And then if you look at 2020, number 1 skill learned on the Coursera platform was writing. Number 3 was Python. It went down from 1 to 3. But number 4 was mindfulness. Number 5 was meditation. Number 6 was gratitude. Number 7 was kindness. Number 8 was listening. And algorithms was number 9 and learning was number 10. And so what this period of crisis, and we're talking about building resilience for crisis, has shown us is that along with functional skills, what one would call broadly human skills have become equally important. And World Economic Forum has done a lot of research and talks about what are the kind of skills that all of us as working professionals will need. And obviously this will vary by career, but at a generic level, the skills that they talk about are a combination of digital, data, and human skills. And obviously, if you're a computer science professional, you might learn a little bit more digital skills. If you are a chartered accountant, you might learn, a little bit more data and CA related skills and so on. And the other thing that our research is also telling us is that the pace of change is so quick that whether it is a company or whether it is a higher education institution, it is almost impossible to meet the needs of your constituents in-house. If you look at an organization like Accenture, which has 400,000 people globally, they have said publicly that we will spend $1 billion, 7,500 crores on training our employees, right? And that 7,500 crores will partly be their own experts, but partly will be platforms like Coursera who will train their employees. And I think even in higher education, because the pace of change is so incredible, I think we are being forced to move to a situation where many education institutions are saying a lot of what my students should be learning will happen as a part of what my institution is teaching. But a lot of what my students are learning should also happen from the best in the world in terms of other universities, and also the best in the world in terms of industry as well. And it is amazing, on the Coursera platform, there are 55 companies who teach and have created courses. These 55 companies like Google, IBM, Autodesk, and many such companies, Facebook, have created 650 courses. And these 650 courses have been taken by 11 lakh learners. So the fact that industry is seeing so much resonance in students is happening because industry is able to bring the kind of skills that we need in the future as well. And Anuragji, if I were to convey one message, my message is that this change where, from Python programming as #1 course in 2019, it became writing within 1 year. And in February last year, exactly 12 months ago, there were 30 universities using the Coursera for Campus platform. And today there are 3,700 universities using the Coursera for Campus platform. This pace of change we have never experienced, all of us. And I think we need to look beyond just our own institutions to see how do we build the resilience for this high pace of change. You're on mute. You're on mute, Dr. Anurag.
Sorry, I like to. So I said nothing works like giving actual examples of adoption. And I was taking note, 2019 Python was #1. It's now #3. But what is key is that writing is #1, mindfulness, gratitude, listening, so human skills. And you also shared a data point in terms of from 30 universities you've gone to 3,700 universities. That's almost 120 times growth. And I think still it's the tip of the iceberg, because both the number and the depth of adoption of technology is only likely to grow. Now let me bring in two practitioners again. Let me first bring in Dr. Sudhir Kavne, and then I will bring in Mr. R. Janardhan. Dr. Sudhir Kavne, first your opening comments on how you're building digital resilience in your own institutions.
Yeah. Anurag, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this discussion. And as earlier speakers spoke about this change and change management, the present higher education sector, I'm seeing the marriage between the industry and a higher education industry. The industry, digital industry, I will say, it's a larger concept, encompasses all branches of IT. So digital technology industry, they are finding that education is a sector where they can play a noticeable role. And it is just benefit of the COVID-19 that all of a sudden, all the institutions of higher learning, which were considering the digital education, ODL, open and distance learning education, is secondary. Now that has become primary. So that has become a driving stage into the instructional impartation of knowledge. That is one thing. Now, seeing the scenario, and I'm very happy that teachers across the world, from school education to higher learning, to the research even, that they are now realized that this technology-driven age, digitally-driven education is must. And unless and until we acquire those skills to utilize this digitally driven education, I think we cannot progress, and we cannot sustain ourselves and cope up ourselves with the changing times. That is the benefit of COVID-19. There are a lot of different challenges this COVID has put before us, but at the same time, some advantages are there, and these are the advantages of that. Number two, in terms of imparting instruction to the students who are, learn from home, teach from home, work from home, all these new concepts have emerged, and that has changed the mindset of teaching and learning methodology. It's not just classroom. Beyond classroom, there are hundreds of classrooms, and that actually scenario has changed the very structure of teaching learning methodology in real terms. In our Mahatma Gandhi Mission MGM University, what we have done, we have collaborated with IBM for imparting undergraduate and graduation program, partnership, dual certification. We have collaborated with international universities offering top-up degree programs. We have introduced collaboration with Coursera, edX, LinkedIn, for that matter, Google. And now our students are having 10,000 options of courses. Apart from their regular instructional material, they are getting education, they are getting from their respective teachers face to face. But at the same time, they have a huge environment of education apart from their classroom teaching or instructional material, choice-based credit system. It is the huge sea of courses available on the global platform, digital platform. Nothing of this sort was available apart from the MOOCs. SWAYAM is there, the Coursera is there, edX is there, MITx is there, but there were few takers. And now because of this revolution of COVID effect, I can say, the things have changed dramatically. And now we are in position to offer, joint degree program. And I call this educational structure as a local education. You can offer local education, you can offer local education, and you can have a hybrid education, local education, where global education is also there, and local inputs are also integrated into the instruction program. Now we are thinking to offer research program globally because of the COVID-19. We are in position to offer master degree program by research to any person in the world working in the any research lab or instructional institution, or for that matter any professional. So these are the new avenues, and we are in a network society. The network society, which is being described as every human being on this earth in next few years or so will be on the smartphone, and the universe of digital citizenship will be created for 7 billion people of the world. And the opportunities in terms of education, opportunities in terms of learning, opportunities in terms of business, and everything is now explorable, and exponential growth is happening in this area. If we not train our students for the future ready jobs in artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, virtual reality, augmented reality, blockchain technology, deploying these futuristic technology into our instructional programs in multidisciplinary program, I think we cannot adapt ourselves to the changing time. I like Dr. Rao's proposal, and in MGM University, how we have changed ourselves, I will just take a minute or so. We have developed, as we are the followers of Mahatma Gandhi, we have developed Gandhian Nai Talim engineering education. So it's a multidisciplinary, multi-skill engineering education. And we have collaborated with the industry from Gulf, and we are offering multidisciplinary engineering skills to all students, life skills, generic skills, ethical skills, professional skills, corporate skills. All those skills will be imparted to the student, and it will be integrated as a one universe of engineering education, so that engineering student will not work in a compartmentalization of the mechanical, civil or like that. They will be working for multidisciplinary environment, and along with that we'll be offering the team program, which we describe as transformation of engineering education mission of MGM. So that team program we are launching with the new batch of ours, and it is a plan that will provide employment to every student, and at the same time 30% student will go for entrepreneurship. And very happy to know that we have created Center for Entrepreneurship Development, and the freshers who have joined our university, 40 to 50% freshers are interested in starting their startup. So 4 years down the line, we will be nurturing, hand-holding and training them to establish their own startups in 4 years to come. And as they come out of that, they will create jobs and others will have their jobs. That is what the vision and mission we are having and we are implementing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sudhir Gavane. Though you were a fifth speaker, you still made it very, very interesting and brought in some very relevant points in terms of interdisciplinary curriculum, in terms of technology really impacting lives. And you talked about how education is a sector where technology has possibly made most impact. And the silver linings, when we look at COVID, are possibly for the domain of learning and education. And of course, players like Coursera are playing a leading role, being a pioneer in that space and continue to reinvent. Let me bring in Mr. R. Janardhan. Mr. Janardhan, you heard four of your colleagues from the higher educational institutions. You heard Mr. Raghav Gupta talking about which courses are now being taken. And he's also talked about how it's expanded from 30 universities to 3,700 institutions. So we'd love your opening comments, and then we'll start the second round with you.
Yeah, I have to compliment Mr. Raghav Gupta and Coursera for being instrumental in making available technology that is relevant today, tomorrow, and for the future, for the immediate future. I'm using the word immediate future because when you talk of technology and knowledge, it undergoes such quick changes that even when you are leaving the campus, many times you wonder whether you will be relevant on the day you report for duty next day morning. So that is the pace with which technology is changing. But then thanks to companies like Coursera, you have done a marvelous work. You have signed up with extremely large number of academic providers in this country and outside. Congratulations to you and to your team. Now, very important that we are talking of technology, how the COVID made an impact. I want to give a very great example of Dr. Anurag Batra himself and his company. Probably you have been exploiting this media to the maximum of being relevant, being present on a daily basis with one section of the economy or one section of India's life in some way or the other. So the visibility is there, the relevance is there, and you're bringing in the top class people, lining up the best of thought leaders on common platforms, and getting together something as marvelous as these discussions, diverse people, diverse thoughts, and we all take away something very rich from this. So I think there is no other publication group, probably other than Business World, which has fully exploited technology, and it's a great example. So I think many of the education institutions, especially who were offering technology management and sciences, for them the COVID was not a real shock, though it was a little shake. We all the first few days was a little disturbing, but then the technology institutions that were already teaching technology programs, engineering programs, they were using technology quite a bit, and therefore there was not that kind of inconvenience caused in the delivery of education. It went on smooth. The transition was without any hitch, and we were able to embrace technology. So if somebody has not done it, and I don't think we should be in the business of education. Today, education calls for some close interaction with the students, with the learners, teachers, and industry, and the government, and probably the community. So this kind of continuation and regular sharing of knowledge and being constantly in touch with each other cannot happen by physical meeting on a day-to-day basis, on an hour-to-hour basis, and therefore technology, though we were forced to adopt and embrace very closely because of COVID, I feel it was only an excuse. If not yesterday, it would happen today, or if not today, it would happen tomorrow. So institutions like Dayanand Sagar, we have spent a huge amount of money in ERP, and so this is only to strengthen what we were already strong, where we were already strong. And for us, embracing technology and its demands was not at all a challenge. We were right from admissions to giving away the placement offers. It all happened seamlessly online. Now, I heard some of our eminent panelists mention about human skills. Now, human skills is something which I'm good when I do my 3-year or 4-year degree. I assume I'm very useful to the industry, but when I join a company or an organization, there I feel there is a huge lack of there is a big gap on what I learned in school and college and what the industry demands. So it is even for a fresher, it becomes so. And for somebody who's already working, he also starts realizing in about 3 years or 4 years that he's becoming stale, because his organization is bringing in technology that is fast emerging, and to stay relevant, that firm has to match what is required by the industry and by the economy itself. Now, if a school or an organization is not in touch with the changes that is happening, very fast changes that is happening, it will be left out. So if we are talking of ultimately a school, college produces human beings of some kind of knowledge, they are trained to do something. Now it's all about human skills, and they train to be useful for the first 4 or 5 years. Earlier, it used to be for life. I get a degree that is good for my life, but today situation has changed, and therefore human skills calls for constant upgrading, we as individuals also have adopted to learning on a daily basis. We consume education in parts and at our leisure, at our own pace, and that is where MOOCs and Coursera and all others are becoming very useful. When the online mode came, it was, okay, I enroll into a particular program, I pay for it, and I attend programs. But then there is certain kind of acceptance and a little rejection also of the online. But today, with the technology coming in and all the knowledge that is being available, credibility of learning through the system, through computers, through internet is catching up, and the greater respectability is there. It is as good as coming out of a good university. Now, what is the challenge is everybody in this country or outside has not having the access to internet the way it is required. The speed, for instance, or the availability. So large number of schools and university students missed out when schools and colleges and universities went and delivered classes during the pandemic. Now, so what is the solution? Government of India and its banks, the public sector banks and the private sector banks, are sitting on tons of money, and they're looking for proposals to come for business to be done. And here is a ready audience, a ready market, a captive market in this country, which wants to buy internet time. They want access to internet. They want to be relevant. They want to connect with the teacher and the school and the college. So what is required? Government or the industry has to invest in a very, very big way to create this kind of infrastructure that is needed today. So a company that enters into this business of connecting people requires support, and the cost has to be the providing the internet connection or the system, and together both of them has to be at a cheaper price, I would say, completely subsidized, and therefore the money that is available with the government banks, public sector banks, should be deployed for creating infrastructure that is required in creating internet and the mobiles or the computers that anybody in this country can afford. I would like to stop at this, and later, if there is something which we can move at, but I'm using this forum to prevail and I'm talking to Dr. Anurag Batra, especially, who's got the kind of contacts who can take it forward, tell the government there is an infrastructure requirement in this country for knowledge to reach everybody. We can't have a situation where there is a digital divide. There are rich people, I can afford everything, the fastest internet connection and the best handheld device or a computer, and the part of the country is the digital have-nots. No, it cannot happen. Knowledge has to reach everybody, every citizen, irrespective of his ability to pay, but as long as that man or woman needs this kind of support. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. Kindness is the biggest virtue, so thank you for being kind to us. We've just been encouraged by professionals like you and leaders like you, so we've gone on, and the industry has supported us in every sector, and the government and the policymakers have also supported us. So we've just got lucky. But let me bring in Raghav into the conversation, and Raghav, if I had to simplify it, I'm simplifying. Sometimes it's not a good thing, sometimes it's a good thing to put a context. If we have to take this challenge of building digital resilience and then building really institutions that embrace digital learning and embrace learning in this new post-COVID world, I would say it is about mindset, it is about infrastructure, and it is about content, right? So the mindset of the institutions, like, Dr. C. Selvan talked about infrastructure, that while there is physical infrastructure, we need to invest in digital infrastructure. Dr. Manjunatha also echoed that, and Dr. Rao also echoed that. Now tell us, if you have to look at mindset, infrastructure, which is hardware, access, and content, how do you see the preparedness?
Sorry, I'm just taking a note. That was a wonderful question. You said mindset, digital infrastructure, and content.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Right. Even I tried to make it simply in your willingness to adopt. That's what I call mindset. Digital infrastructure is in terms of access devices, bandwidth, putting money into areas that will enable content through digital being enabled, and then is the content, which is what you provide. So give us a sense of what is your assessment dealing with more than 3,000 educational institutions and universities. Where are we?
Yeah, I think the toughest part of all these three elements is, of course, mindset, Anurag. There are some institutions that have adopted the change that is coming fairly quickly, and then there are some which are still hoping and praying that this is only temporary and it will go away. And my sense is, and given that I get the opportunity to speak to many educational leaders, I think we will see the gap post-COVID between the good institutions and the not so good institutions widen quite significantly because of the fact that mindset shift is not happening. One element which is contributing to mindset shift is the adoption of platforms like Coursera at a student level has been mind-boggling. So even if a faculty member or a academic leader has hesitated sometimes to say, should we be adopting digital? The adoption at a student level, because they're very comfortable with technology, has been massive. So I think that's helping with some of the mindset. I think in the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, the main challenge is, of course, funding for those students who are coming from economically weaker backgrounds or in rural areas. I think there is work being done from an internet connectivity standpoint, and without spending too much time on it, but the maximum internet connectivity speed that one needs is if you're doing a live Zoom class. So if the lecture is a live Zoom lecture, you need high quality internet connectivity. What we've done is we've made available the ability to download content and view it when you're offline, so that experience is a lot better. And that simplifies the need for internet to some extent, but I don't think we have a solution which is just completely there. On content, I would say there's a maximum pace of development which is happening. And I use our example to say this. There are 2,000 institutions creating content on our platform. Every year we are adding 600, 700 courses. We are adding thousands of projects on our platform. Last year when COVID hit, in March, we had a course from Imperial University which was launched in March. All of us went down in lockdown in mid-March or 20th of March or so. But within 2 weeks' time, Imperial University had put out a course saying this is what you need to understand as an individual, as a layperson who is not a healthcare person, on how to be able to manage COVID in your life. And we had lakhs of people who took that course in India, and we made that course available for free. So on content, because it is this whole mechanism of aggregation, if you're best in something, if you're best in AI and you're in Stanford, or if you're best in understanding COVID and you're at Imperial College London, this aggregation can provide a lot of momentum. And so content, I think, is where we are seeing a lot of growth happen. And that's where I think we are possibly in a good position.
That perspective in terms of that, really mindset is something that needs to change. There's a question also, or a comment/question, which echoes exactly what you're saying in the chat. Rakesh Kalra is saying there are many educational institutions who don't have critical marks and are affiliated to larger universities who are not changing fast enough. What does the panel recommend a way forward, as they do not churn out a lot of job-ready professionals? So he's saying very similar things. We'll address it in the end. I was just supporting a point of view. Now let me again bring in Dr. Selvan, Dr. Rao, Dr. Manjunatha, Dr. Gavne, and Mr. R. Janardhan into the conversation. Let's move into, we talked about being digital ready. Now, how digital ready is your institution vis-a-vis it's the ecosystem? And, again, last 11 months, we were forced to change, if I may say. COVID acted as a catalyst. Now you have a choice. What are you doing to be even more digital ready for the future in terms of infrastructure, mindset, content? Let me start with Dr. Selvan and then go around the house.
Yeah, thank you, Anurag. In fact, education from home was never envisaged at a large scale. The moment lockdown was announced, we never knew that it is going to take a long time for us to get back to the campus. Actually, we were sitting idle for about 2 weeks or so, and then suddenly few of us gathered and we spoke over phone and then said, okay, why not we do something? Because we cannot keep idle at home, and there are a number of students staying at different places. So we thought that we should have some sort of brainstorming session amongst the deans, the directors, then head of the departments. Then we also reached out to the faculty and the student representatives. So that took us about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then we brought in some mindset among all these people. It is not that you tune up only the faculty and not the students. So during the consultative process, we could bring in some amount of mindset among all stakeholders. And we did understand a lot of challenges where certain places do not have internet connectivity. There'll be only one room. There'll be 2-3 kids studying in different institutions. So those were some of the challenges. Of course, the bandwidth connectivity. Those were the power supply was one another thing. Data is another thing. So there were a lot of challenges, and then somehow or other we kickstarted the process. And over a period of time, we happened to talk to the students again and again, made some mid-course corrections, and felt that students by and large are happy. I'm not saying that everybody was happy, but by and large they were happy. With regard to the last point that you said is about the content. Of course, infrastructure, a lot of challenges are still there, but there is a lot of improvement. There was one statistics from the Department of Telecommunications, which indicated that between the period from March 22nd to March 28th alone, Indian citizens consumed an average of 307 petabytes of data. This is a huge spike in the internet activity that shows the access to internet services and facilities even in the most regions of the country. So that was a quick change from everybody, not only from academics, from everybody. So that was thing. But the real challenge that we faced was making our faculty to deliver courses through online. That was the bigger challenge. Though we have earmarked every faculty that they should undergo at least one online course every semester, that did help them a little bit, but definitely not to the extent where the student liked it. So that was one challenge that we faced, and we gave them some sort of training program to gear up. The other thing is lack of social cohesion. Whatever you deliver through online, that's not going to give a complete satisfaction for the students. So they'll be missing out skills like opportunity to lead a team, visit a workstation, engage in hands-on experience in laboratories, teaming with peers for innovation or sports, and even refinement of soft skills. So these were some of the challenges. Though we could deliver these courses online, though they happen to learn these things, but these are all absolutely missing. So what we thought was we introduced some sort of group projects. Okay, why not these 4 or 5 students, they join together, do some project. This is the theme. This is the thing that you need to come up. So in certain way, we could engage them properly. So the other challenge that we faced was the assessments. How do you assess the performance of students? All along, we have been having only face-to-face, paper, pencil. Suddenly you go digital. We have a particular system. You know that education system is very rigid. Whatever you do, you go to the examination. It is the strictest. Strictest thing that is done in every institution. If you let loose in examination, that means your name goes. So we were trying to bring in a lot of changes in changing the question paper pattern, devising questions, testing the capability, and all those things. And it still continues to be a challenge. Now, I would like to say one thing about the concern with regard to the learning, because it looks like we could easily categorize students who really perform well, average students, and who needs improvement. But during this online examination, we found that there is almost the gaps are closed. So we need to bring in a lot of things in terms of assessing the students. That's very, very important. So the toppers, the above average, and below average all seem to be sharing the more or less same information. That's really the challenge. We are working on that to see that we are in some sort of change in the assessment process.
Thank you so much, Dr. Selvan. I would like to bring in Dr. Gavne again into the conversation. Dr. Gavne, how do you make sure that you stay ahead? For the future, what you invested till now is good enough, but how do you invest more in the infrastructure, in content, and in some way reimagine your business? You did so much till now. What are you planning to do? Because now every institution is doing it. You have to do it not for the fact that you have to be, future ready, but it is about just being, ahead of the game. So you have to stay ahead of the game, exploit the possibilities. So what are you doing to be future ready in a big way? Dr. Manjulatha?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, I think the relevant question you asked, how the institution is ready. Sir, we adopted one particular system and we embraced that also. That is ERP system. We have our own software. We started in that software to write the lesson plan, and there itself we are going to write the course outcome, and course outcome is automatically mapping to PO. All those things, what are all the accreditation process we have adopted in that. Then next is the in teaching learning also, we need the study material electronic, that is e-study material. That also we told all the faculty members should have the e-learning material. That we actually made the one group, that too in terms of WhatsApp group, also in social media. We used all the social media to reach our study material to all the students, even the post-pandemic. I cannot say now post-pandemic. Already we started offline classes. Now also we are sharing our study material to all the students electronically. That also we are ready with that. The next is assessment. What the Selvam sir is telling, assessment is a big challenge. So initially also we actually conducted online examination and other things. We found that even the above average, below average, and the average student, they were started getting the same marks. So for that, what we did, we started proctored online examination system. In that proctored online examination system, the individual, the student is connected to the invigilator so that we can stop the malpractice, and also sometimes we also understood students were sharing the answer to their friends. So that also we actually started stopping that. And also in CIE component, that is continuous internal evaluation also, we started asking surprise test and also surprise quizzes. So initially we used to give some of the topics to discuss in online, but there also we understood some the understanding with the other students also, they were getting the same marks. There also surprise quiz testers also we started, sir. This is with respect to the assessment. And also through our software, we able to announce the result. We actually able to announce the revaluation script and even the examination application. Everything we made already online, sir. Because we actually use one ERP continuous software. There from admission till the result announcement, even the placement activities also, we connected well through electronic media. And even we actually started using HRMS software also. There also, even I am not at all signing any leave letters of our employees. Everything it is online, sir. Even leave and their any vacation leave, anything it is there. Everything we are doing that. And we are trying our level best to do paperless office, but the statutory bodies are not accepting that. So for that purpose only, we are using some paper, sir. This is how actually our industry is ready, sir. Within short time, I could.
Thank you. I mean, we don't have a representative from the statutory body, but AICT led by Professor Anil Sahasbuddha has been very proactive and been a positive catalyst, and not just, I wouldn't call it a statutory body, only I would call it a facilitator, a catalyst. They've been very, very responsive, and I'm sure as
But in this, sir, sorry to disturb you, I'm grateful to AICTE. Now they made it everything online, sir.
Absolutely.
Yeah, AICTE, I don't have any much other problem because we have some other statutory bodies.
Yeah.
But AICTE,
Absolutely.
I'm grateful to them.
It's
Everything
been
is
very
online,
progressive and
Yes.
very. So you basically are saying that the process of adopting digital ways of learning and education are irreversible. In the way you're going forward, it has already become a fabric of how you are conducting yourselves and how the learning is happening. So there is no reversibility on it. We have Dr. D.N. Rao and Mr. R. Jagannathan to make their comments before I take quick questions from the audience. Dr. D.N. Rao, post your comments. You heard from all your colleagues and you heard from Raghav. What do you think is being done by the Vigna Jyoti group of institutions to become even more relevant in terms of this fully digital world?
One thing we realize is the students could be as digital as the institution. Quite
Beautiful.
rightly said. I think the students could be as digital as the institution. So this exercise we started almost a few years ago, and in fact, Bombay IIT has a very nice course on how to teach online, how to maintain the records, how to assess. I think it's a wonderful thing. Almost quite tens of our faculty were trained at IIT Bombay, and they retrained our faculty across the institution, including the primary school, to the engineering program, to the arts program, and to the management program. Okay, so continuous training is the only solution for this, and visualizing the future. Okay, and whatever may be the wish, the ultimate truth is going to be digitization is going to be that. Simple.
Yeah, and it is the only. It's a train that's already left the station, and you have to now. When you talk of, traditionally you said, oh, we have such a big campus, we have so many auditoriums, we have classrooms. Today, I think in the future you'll talk about how digital ready you are, how digitally immersive is the learning experience, how all the digital content is available, how digital tools are being used into, and there is a hybrid model in play. So all this will become an important part of conversations when you talk of excellence in a higher education institution. Mr. R. Janardhan, your point of view, and then I'll take a few questions.
Yeah. When I came into the Anil Sagar institutions, and that was almost about 18, 19 years ago, the first thing that I was taken around and shown was the digital library, where at any point of time, 300 students could go sit and use the facility. It was, we took a lot of pride in showcasing this to any visitor who come. And then we were the first Wi-Fi campus. In those days, to become a Wi-Fi campus was something very unique. And about 40-50% of our students also were staying in hostels. So for them, learning and accessing their parents, connecting with parents and relatives was also important. And being a very large campus spread over 29 acres with 4,000-5,000 students in those days in just one college, and all put together about 17,000-18,000 students. You needed that many connectivities, and so for us, going technology, understanding the reason, making investments on that, we thought it became as important as putting up a new beautiful auditorium or creating the modern classrooms and all that. Fortunately, again, being in Bangalore, we had access to people with strong technological skills and knowledge and user experience. So they were coming in with good qualification to come and join as faculty. And most of them were quite young. And therefore, when the push came to adopt technology more intensely, it was quite easy. Yeah, there was a small set of faculty who found that on a day-to-day basis teaching online was a little challenge. But then over a period of time, in a few weeks, we were able to see they all drew curves, and from their own experience, they were able to see they made huge progress. They were able to get feedback from colleagues and from students, and they saw what corrections are required, and they found that technology is probably it is making their life easier to explain very tough concepts to students. So there was greater appreciation and acceptance of this teacher's teaching in the classroom, when you compare it with the pre-online days. And therefore, today, most of the teachers, at least in our campus and maybe even in other campuses, they have become addicted to using technology for most part of the teaching and learning process. And I think this is a good situation. If you give me 1 or 2 minutes time, I would like to quote examples of what happened, at least in one campus in the US, where they found when technology was being used by the haves, there were a large number of students who were missing out. So the university went about, scouted all that the e-waste that was lying in the university and in the outside neighborhood. What is happening? They brought all that and created systems that would become, you could repair, and repairing and all that mostly was in Asia, at least definitely in India. Otherwise the rest of the world would buy, use, throw. But we are one who would repair anything and everything. So our ambassador cars, Fiat cars would be running for 20, 30 years. So it was surprising that a US university realized that you can't buy computers and handheld devices and give it all to students. So they went in for a collection of the e-waste, segregating, making old machines, redundant machines work, and then it was given away free. So that is an experience of a US university. And one more university which did something very unique was they came out with an app. It's called the MyLapu, and this solved a lot of problems, and which allowed for students, teachers to stay connected, students to be connected, and students to be connected. It was becoming seamless. Students could learn the way they want at their pace and all, submit lessons even when they are on the same app. And there was the challenge of internet was just done away with. So this was a prior study even before the pandemic came. So again, this university was in Los Angeles, Pacific University, devoted only to online. They did a wonderful job, and for them, the COVID time became a testing opportunity, and it became a marvelous success. So there have been good examples of how some universities have risen to this challenge, and I think these are good examples for all of us to take note of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. Raghav, your final point in terms of how do you get all the stakeholders and how the hybrid model also brings out the best of both worlds. If you can give a comment on that, then we'll take closing comment from everyone.
Sure. So I think if I look at some of the universities that have been quite successful in this new environment, and along with teaching on campus, also bringing online and doing a good job of that, many of them have actually created a position which is either a chief digital officer or a chief innovation officer. And they're conscious that this is a change. Anurag, you spoke about a mindset change, and they've empowered the chief digital officer or the chief innovation officer to do this. We work with Geetham University. They have 25,000 students learning on Coursera. And the chief innovation officer, who comes from a technology background himself, has done a wonderful job of bringing about this new way of thinking. So I think firstly, one of the key elements has been that somebody with the right experience and the right mindset has to be empowered, and that individual has to partner carefully and very hand in glove with the academic leadership, with the deans and the vice chancellors, to be able to bring about this change. And the other thing that I would say is that the other element which you asked earlier as well, which is about digital infrastructure, I think there are 4 pieces to that digital infrastructure specifically. It's real-time communication tools like Zoom, it is platforms like Coursera, it is a learning management system, and then I think Dr. Manjunath asked this point about proctoring. And there is good amount of platforms available. Even Coursera has a lot of assessments and proctoring available. So if we empower leadership, chief digital officer, and if we put in the right digital infrastructure, I think that's an approach that we've seen has been quite successful with some universities who are doing this very well.
Thank you so much. I happen to know the Geetam gentleman that you're referring. Of course, one of the questions, Raghav, that is very often asked is, what about live experience? And again, because we're talking of higher education and engineering is an integral part, how do you do, somebody's asking, how do you do practicals online? I mean, that's not possible, So tell us, for example, in the physical world, we value, you yourself said that the top 5 courses are writing, mindfulness, gratitude, listening. Now, those are things that can only happen through human interaction. So how do you ensure a healthy balance? Of course, in terms of content availability, you got to make it happen. But how do you ensure a healthy balance?
So I think we are seeing many universities, especially in engineering, take a 70-30 approach. 70% when campus is open needs to come back onto campus. Physical labs needs to be one of those. I'm a mechanical engineer. If I'm in a thermodynamics lab, it possibly needs to be on campus. But today, as a mechanical engineer, I might be learning certain softwares as well, and that can happen online. And also, a lot of the learning, especially technologies, can happen quite seamlessly online. The skills that I was talking about, Anurag, are all being learned online. One of the most popular courses on Coursera last year was the Science of Well-Being from Yale University. And, you're learning happiness, the science of happiness online and the science of well-being online as well. But I do think the 70-30 rule is a good thumb rule to think about, that 70% possibly going back onto campus in the physical world and possibly 30% staying online and continuing to be digital in the future.
Thank you so much. There are lots of questions coming. We've already answered most of them. But Jyotsna Cherukuru is saying, we're all talking about digitization. What about the engagement of students and the excitement among them? Vengagiri G. Naidu is saying, instead, partly face-to-face, digital online and offline videos would be better. In my sense, total digital teaching and learning may not be the best. Nagendra Prasad is saying, how are you including and inculcating values in these hard times when businesses are closing down, so on and so forth. Dr. Sushmita is saying, what steps were taken in campuses in order to make the online evaluation process fair and objective? Sukhwinder Singh is saying, everybody please suggest, how do we execute the lab classes online? That's the question I asked. Dr. Sushmita has another question. To what extent specific features from NEP are being... So we've in some way taken all these. I would ask all of you one quick closing short comment on what you are doing in your university for the future, which is a big leap, which is not just incremental in terms of embracing this digital resilience and the digital learning experience. And let me start with Mr. R. Janardhan. You were last in both the rounds, so let me start first with you. Mr. Janardhan, one thing that you are doing that will make you ahead of everyone.
ERP and everything that we do in the campus is now technology-led, and therefore we were quite strong and doing well using technology to things fast and scientific. And but now we are fully geared up to face any type of challenge with a heavy investment in ERP in terms of people and infrastructure. So we are ready.
Here, what Mr. R. Janardhan is saying, that even in our own way of being, we become fully digital, and that will possibly lead to a mindset change, Raghav, and then go on to build on the content and the digital infrastructure. Dr. Selvan, one final quick comment from you.
We want to change the classrooms from smart devices to virtual reality. That's our next goal.
Thank you for being so specific. And again, it's a big leap. Again, if virtual reality can be brought in a full way in learning, and you look at millennials, they're using gaming and virtual reality as part of their everyday life's existence. If you can integrate learning with that and content with that, it can be a game changer. Thank you. Dr. D.N. Rao, your final comment.
My final comment is digital will happen. But what is most important is exciting the students of their future. Here at Vijnana Jyoti, the day they come, we give them a career vision schooling for almost 2 months. When you become an engineer, when you become a manager, these are the things that are open for you. Dream about them. And then we have a system of teaching. Anything you teach has to be a practical relevance. In management courses, it's called case study. But in engineering and other things, we coined a word called wit and will. The teacher, when he comes to the classroom. He has to say, why am I teaching today this subject? Where is it used? Then the student in parallel will write a small note at the end of the lecture, say, why I have learned this one, where I am going to use it. Automatically, the practical sense will come in and the learning has improved tremendously. So these two things, career vision approach and wit and will. Why am I teaching what I'm teaching? Why am I learning what I'm learning? These two steps, I think, will enhance the intake of teaching into a practical situation.
Dr. Manjunatha, your final word.
Yes, sir. One is blended mode of teaching learning we wanted to implement, sir. As Raghav Gupta said, 70% maybe offline and 30% online. Maybe in future that will become reverse, 30 in offline and 70 online also, sir. Definitely we are going to ready this infrastructure in our campus, sir. Thank you for the interaction.
Thank you so much. Raghav, you have the final word. Being a digital evangelist, if I may use the word, what do you see happening?
From our perspective, obviously lots has changed. What we are working on, Anurag, is more high quality content from the world's top universities, from the world's top companies, including Indian universities. More product capability in terms of assessments, in terms of projects, and so on, and lesser price. I think that's what we want to be able to bring to higher education.
Beautifully summed up. Bring the best content from across the world in India to the higher education institutions, build new tools in terms of assessment with due justice to digital learning, and third is price points that enable you to do it better, and product improvement as you go along. So thank you so much. Thank you to all the leaders from the education ecosystem for giving their valuable inputs and implementing what they say. Thank you, Raghav, for enabling the ecosystem. We at BW Education will continue to be at the forefront of this change and lead conversations in it. So thank you, Dr. D.N. Rao. Thank you, Dr. Manjunatha. Thank you, Dr. Sudhir Gavne. Thank you, Dr. Selvan. Thank you, Mr. R. Janardhan. Thank you, Mr. Raghav Gupta, for joining this BW Education Focus Friday. The discussion.
And thank you for coining the word digital evangelist. That's a very nice word.
It has existed for many years. Yeah, so it is. We've used it when the digital advertising happened 20 years back. So, but you're right. As one of you said, the impact of digital in education possibly is the highest, and the reverse impact it can have can be used. So thank you. Those of you who missed this conversation can revisit the video on the BW Education YouTube page, read it in the next issue of BW Education, or read a full transcript on bweducation.com. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Wish you luck in your endeavor to be building digital resilience in higher education. Thanks.